Hey everybody, what's happening? Brent Axe here, and we're live on the Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page via syracuse.com. We're coming right off the heels, if you're watching us live, off Dino Baber's press conference following a 42-21 win for the Orange over Boston College. And do you believe it? The Syracuse football team finishes the 2018 season with a 9-3 record. Who would have thunk? Who would have saw it coming after back-to-back 4-8 seasons? Most projections, Syracuse fans would have been happy with, say, a 4-8 record or a 6-6 record off the 4-8 record of a year ago. Just get bowl eligible and build from there. But Syracuse was better than that. They were hungrier for more. And, really, I mean, if you really – beggars can't be choosers here. This is one heck of a record that Syracuse finished with. But, you're down to two fourth-quarter plays, fourth down plays against Clemson and Pittsburgh, the two teams that will meet in the ACC championship game, by the way. And, a one-loss season isn't really that crazy. It's not really out of the realm of possibility. But it was 9-3, Syracuse's best record and their best finish since 2001. And now all the Orange await is what bowl game they'll be going to. Will Syracuse fans get a chance to go somewhere warm, like, say, the Camping World Bowl in Orlando or the Sun Bowl in El Paso, maybe the Gator Bowl in Syracuse's future? The Pinstripe Bowl is certainly in the debate. It's certainly, a possibility for the Orange. I think Syracuse fans have kind of been there, done that with two Pinstripe Bowl appearances and, of course, the game last week at Yankee Stadium against Notre Dame. But nonetheless, Syracuse fans really happy that they're going to a bowl game, period. We're here today presented by our friends at Krause Health. We are live after every football game, but we also upload this to YouTube. So I would encourage you to subscribe to Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube as well, so you can watch this replay anytime you want. It was the Eric Dungey show today for Syracuse beating Boston College 42-21, which is incredible to think about because you go to that Notre Dame game, and there's Eric Dungey on a run play, comes back to the huddle, can't even stand. He literally falls to the ground like a sack of bricks. And there were reports after the game that he couldn't even walk to the team bus. He had to be carted from the locker room to the team bus. So I think we were all under the assumption that we had seen the last of Eric Dungey maybe for the regular season. Maybe he'd have time to heal up, play in a bowl game, because that's not until late December, no matter what the scenario is for the Orange. Not only does Eric Dungey come back, he has a career-high 6 touchdowns accounted for in one game. That used to be the Syracuse record. Jim Brown said it way back in the day. Zach Mahoney, believe it or not, now holds the record with 7 touchdowns in one game in that crazy Pittsburgh game from a couple years ago. Dungey with 6 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 3 on the ground. Overall, Eric Dungey's numbers today, 21 of 34, 362 yards, 3 touchdowns in the air. Dungey running the football, had 34 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns rushing. He was incredible for Syracuse. On, the rushing end, it was, Syracuse came into this game having to stop Boston College and stop the run, right? This is a BC team that's very physical, that runs the ball very well. You know what? Dante Strickland, 129 yards, really set up one of the drives that Dungey had the touchdown run. He was incredible on the day. Mo Neal came in, was big in the second half, 10 carries for 37 yards, Dungey for 34. Sean Riley, the little water bug, 5 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown. Jamal Custis had 68 yards and a touchdown. Taj Harris, the nice play in the corner of the end zone, heading for the back pylon, had a touchdown on the day, and he had 45 yards receiving on the day. Got to give a big shout-out on the defensive end as well, because Ryan Guthrie was a machine again. 12 tackles on the day, more than doubled anybody else in that category. Had several players that had 6 tackles on the day, but Guthrie had 12, including a tackle for a loss. He has led Syracuse in tackles. I think that's now 6 games in a row that Guthrie has led this team. He has been incredible on the defensive end. And, that was something that coming in, Boston College was kind of known as the physical team, that Syracuse would be in for a real physical matchup. But Syracuse, clearly, if I could, steal a term here, out-physicaled Pittsburgh, or Boston College, pardon me, in this game. And, everything that you felt Syracuse had to do, they did. Their defense was great and big stops. There were some dumb penalties. There were some plays that, Syracuse kept Boston College in this game in the first half. And then, the play where Eric Dungey threw the football in the face of the defender. This really could have been a lot worse, honestly. 42-21 was the final. Syracuse had several opportunities to put it well in hand before that. But, that's football, as they say, and they just kept coming, just kept taking advantage of BC. A.J. Dillon, their big runner, didn't play the second half. He's been going through an ankle injury situation. So slowly but surely, Syracuse just kept making the big plays. Dungey was fantastic. Strickland was fantastic. Syracuse had a few turnovers in this game as well. Boston College kept jumping off sides, which was incredible to see. Syracuse drew BC off sides on fourth down alone 3 times in this game. So, and penalties were the problem for Syracuse overall. I'm just looking at the stats here. Syracuse had 10 penalties in this game. BC had just 6, but it was more of not the quantity of the penalties. It was more the quality, if you will, for Syracuse. I know a couple other stats to throw at you here. Overall, Syracuse in this game ran 93 plays, 559 yards. Boston College, 69 plays for 356. So you see how much more Syracuse had the ball in this game. I mentioned, BC was the team noted as the rushing team. Well, they only rushed for 105 yards on 32 carries. Syracuse had 197 yards on 58 carries in this game and dominates a BC team. And now Syracuse fans are thinking about what bowl game they could go to and are just thinking about what Syracuse can do to keep Dino Babers as the head coach here, because look, there's a lot of colleges that are going to need coaches, USC being one of them, I believe, and we'll see what other schools fire their coaches and move on here. If I had to make a prediction, just a educated guess on my part, I think Dino's coaching Syracuse football in 2019. But people are going to make a run at him, and there's going to be schools that are going to look and say what he did at Syracuse. Syracuse just one of 3 teams that doubled or more than doubled their win total from a year ago. Syracuse, Florida, and I can't remember the third team off the top of my head, but only 3, I think it was Baylor. Only 3 teams have done that. So Dino's going to be a desired entity out there, and I think that John Wildhack and the powers that be at Syracuse are ready for that. I think an extension's on the way. Again, this is all just educated guess on my part. I'm not reporting this. I just call it informed speculation that they're going to take care of Dino. They saw this coming. They know they're ready for it. And I think Dino wants to be here. I think Dino's 58 years old. He's coached at a lot of places. He's got a system put well into place. He's got controlled conditions to do it. The Carrier Dome is about to get a major renovation. They've got a terrific indoor practice facility. Recruiting is kind of at the bottom statistically of the ACC right now, but this is a year where Syracuse doesn't need as many players because they're getting a ton of players back for next year. Remember, they've got running back from Oklahoma, wide receiver from Michigan State that they've stocked away. They made a couple huge recruiting gains this past week. 2 4-star or near 4-star linebackers committed to Syracuse. So there's big-time momentum here. Syracuse plays in a big bowl game about a month from now. We'll see which one it is. By the way, in case you're wondering, the bowls get announced next Sunday. They announced the college football playoff, the New Year's 6 bowls, and just kind of go down the list. ESPN has a bowl selection show, so we'll find out officially where Syracuse goes. Not tomorrow, next Sunday. So life is good if you're a Syracuse football fan, that's for sure. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comments here. Hop in those comments, chat along on this. A lot of you saying what bowl game Syracuse should go to. Torrance saying that the future in Syracuse is bright. It's hard to argue at that point. Keith saying great all-around effort, need to work on those penalties. Yeah, the penalties were tough. And, Eric Dungey, sometimes the competitiveness gets the best of him. You don't throw a football in somebody's face and some of these other – it was a thought that he had a second unsportsmanlike penalty, and they were going to throw him out of the game. Can you imagine if he got thrown out of his final regular season game at Syracuse, but the other penalty ended up being on Dante Strickland, so he stayed in the football game. Yeah, there were some pretty bad penalties here. That's something you got to clean up. But for the most part, this was a game that Syracuse controlled. This was a game that Syracuse did what it wanted against Boston College. The thing I'm really almost more impressed with, Dungey, I'm used to this. I wasn't surprised when he came in. I wasn't surprised. I was somewhat surprised based on the injury a week ago, but we know how tough he is. We know how he wants to be there for his team. And, I didn't want to say anything earlier in the week, but I went over to the Syracuse football facility on, Wednesday to interview Dino Babers. And while waiting for Dino in the lobby, it just so happens Eric Dungey walks right by me, and he looked fine. Now, just because you could walk doesn't mean you could play in a football game, but I had an inclination then. I'm like, wow, this guy's looking pretty good right now. Maybe he's not hurting as much as we think he is and might have an opportunity to play in this game. And there he was, and he was brilliant in this game for Syracuse. And now they just await their next opponent and what bowl game they will go to. Scott asking about bowling. It really comes down to, Scott, you got to sell tickets. You got to fill hotel rooms. You got to bring a fan base there. And I'll check on the score while we're yapping about it here, because I think the team that's in real competition with Syracuse, let's start with the Camping World Bowl in Orlando, is NC State. As I look at it here, as we're live, NC State and Carolina are tied. So if North Carolina State goes 7-4, and Syracuse is 9-3, then the Camping World Bowl really comes into focus, and I think they'll pick Syracuse. If NC State wins that game, they still might take an 8-3 NC State team over Syracuse, because bowl games want to sell tickets, they want to sell hotel rooms, they want to sell everything, and NC State's fan base is a little closer to Orlando, as much as Syracuse fans would love a trip to Orlando. In December 28th is the date of the Camping World Bowl. Politics is one way to put it. It's more like, selling is the way to put it. But that is clearly in play. I think the Gator Bowl's in play. I think the Sun Bowl, which is in El Paso, is in play. The Pinstripe Bowl is in the conversation, and that's if those other bowls pass on Syracuse for whatever reason. If I had to make a prediction, I do think the Camping World Bowl is going to take a shot on Syracuse. I think they know a lot of Syracuse fans will be eager to be there. There's a lot of displanted New Yorkers and Northeasterners in Florida that could easily make that game. A lot of Syracuse fans throughout the country in the South that would make an effort to be there. There's a lot of direct flights from Syracuse to Orlando, easy to get to, and fans are anxious to see a team in a different bowl setting. The Pinstripe Bowl would be a letdown. I don't think people want to go back to Yankee Stadium. That's nothing against going to football at Yankee Stadium. It's a unique thing. Being in New York around Christmas, New Year's Eve time is great, but it's cold up here, man. It was 5 degrees on Thanksgiving, so Syracuse fans want to go and experience something different. I think the Camping World Bowl folks should take that into consideration. I'm not sure who the opponent would be for the Camping World Bowl, but they'd set up a great matchup, and fans from the other team would be there, balance things out. All told, I think that's who they should take. Cameron saying if USC looks at Dino, he may leave. Warmer weather in Cali, and he is from California. I'd be worried about USC. I'm not sure what their line of thinking is. Lynn Swan's the athletic director there now. There's a lot of school of thought that if they do fire Clay Helton, we'll see what happens against Notre Dame here on Saturday night, that they'll go with an SC guy. I think that's what Lynn Swan will do. I think they'll certainly consider Dino. I think he's going to be a target for a lot of schools. But, Dino's not going to go to Louisville. Or, there's always going to be anywhere from 10 to 12 job openings, maybe more, maybe a little less. The one I'd be worried about is USC. That's the school that has a more desired property, better name. You mentioned the weather. They could certainly pay Dino more than Syracuse could. But Dino's going to be back here in 2019. I think he's coaching this team next year. It's not to say he doesn't, deserve fair market value, a little bit of a raise, not only for him, but his assistant coaches at Syracuse. You take Syracuse from 4-8 to 9-3, that's going to be noticed, and people will inquire, but I think he's going to be back here coaching next season. Oh, NC State won that game, John said. Was I behind on my scoreboard here? Let me update. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Thank you for updating me on that, John. So NC State beat North Carolina 34-28. That game went to overtime, as a matter of fact. So now it's a choice for the Camping World Bowl. 8-3 NC State. They've got a good quarterback in Ryan Finley, and a team that I think Syracuse is a more desired entity with the high-paced offense. They can score. They can put up a lot of points. They're an entertaining product, and some of the other reasons I brought up a few minutes ago about, a fan base that wants to travel and wants to go somewhere cool. I mean, Orlando is a great place to spend a couple of days. There's a couple of theme parks there you can go to. The weather's terrific. There's reason that Syracuse fans would make the investment and go. So we'll see where they go on that front. Thanks to you guys who are updating me on that score there. I was looking at an old scoreboard. So NC State won that game 34-28. It's just incredible to think about this season and how, at the beginning of the year, and, you talk yourself into a narrative, and, football is just a sport where you have so much time to think about something. And you get it in your head all summer long when we know football's coming, right? And the number I think people got in their head after back-to-back 4-8 seasons was just get to that 6-win mark. Get that bowl game, and we'll build from there. I think most people, they mention it on the ESPN broadcast, feel like Syracuse is ahead of pace. Sometimes it's just what happens. Syracuse had a great team. They had, the offense that we knew would be good. They had a special teams that was incredible. It was shocking to see Andre Schmidt miss a kick as bad as he did, but he still might win the Lou Groza Award. We know how good Syracuse's special teams has been all season long. Their defense certainly has leaked at times and has to come through with big plays when needed, but their pass rush was terrific. I mentioned how good Ryan Guthrie has been this year and has made the plays. They're one of the best third down defenses in college football. So they had a better overall product, and let's be honest here. Syracuse got lucky in that programs like Florida State were down. Programs like Louisville were down. And Syracuse just kept winning and, had their shot against Clemson and had their shot against Pittsburgh. But, it was almost the perfect storm of Syracuse won close games this year that they would have lost a year ago, that other teams, were off, that Syracuse had, was undefeated at home this season. They figured out how to win. Now 2 road games on the year, Wake Forest and Boston College. And it's a team – I've never seen a Syracuse team in recent memory that is as together. Dino Babers always brings it up, our Ohana, right, our La Familia. This team is together. They're on the same page. They believe in what their head coach is doing, the message that he's spreading there. And, it's no longer belief without evidence. The evidence is there. The big wins that Syracuse has had in recent years, Virginia Tech, Clemson, you come into 2018, they keep building up these big wins that they should have, beating ranked teams, mostly at home. Florida State was added to that mix this year, although Florida State's down. The evidence is there. Syracuse got back into the top 25 for the first time since 2001. And all these marks that we have seen and have discussed here throughout the season, whatever bowl game they go to, unless it's the Pinstripe Bowl, which I think some people would kind of groan at, it's all gravy, man. It's just an incredible season, and the momentum that they have built and what Dino Babers has put into place here, it's all coming together. I mean, think of when he stood at that podium and said, visualize this. And we all remember that speech, right? Well, most of what he mentioned that day has either come true or is on track to coming true. Amber saying, great to have a great season finally. Feel so proud of them. Rob makes a great point. Turnover margin was massive. Syracuse had one of the best turnover margins in college football this year. They picked up a few more turnovers today. That was huge. Turnover margin, they stayed relatively healthy, which is always something you need as a football team. They started running the ball better down the stretch. Defense was opportunistic, as you mentioned. Everything you needed to come together for this team as a whole came together. That's a great point, Rob, about the turnover margin. Neil says, do you think Dungey has a shot at playing on Sundays? Neil, I do in this sense. I don't think that Dungey will be used in a traditional sense. But I think you look at what the National Football League is going towards, the Saints, the Rams, the Chiefs, all these teams that are just piling up points. Defense is becoming more and more irrelevant, frankly, at the NFL level. They're making it easier for teams to score, and they're calling more penalties on the defense. By the way, awful job by the officials in the Syracuse-Boston College game. They missed an obvious targeting call on a special teams play. They missed a bunch in this game. There was a play where Eric Dungey, his forward progress was clearly stopped. They didn't blow the whistle. He took an unnecessary hit. These officials should be reprimanded by the ACC. They were awful. It's one thing to be bad. It's quite another to fail at what a referee is partially out there to do, player safety. You got to call these penalties on these vicious hits and these unnecessary hits that players are taking. These god-awful officials today. While we're bringing up officiating, I had to mention that. But I don't think Dungey has a shot at being like a starting quarterback in a traditional sense. But look, the kid is mobile. He's got a great arm. He's smart. I think teams will be leery of his injury history. That's one thing you got to think about when you're making an investment in a quarterback. I think one thing Dungey's got going for him, it's all on what draft are you in. This is not a draft that is stocked with first-round talent at the quarterback position. This is a heavily based defensive draft. I think I was looking at it the other day. 9 of the first 11 picks in Mel Kiper Jr.'s mock draft are all defensive tackles. So if you're a team that needs an offensive player, needs a quarterback, needs to just bring somebody in, look at what the Saints are doing, kind of utilizing players in different positions. I think Dungey will get a look. I think he will get drafted. I definitely think he'll get drafted. It'll be interesting to see what happens to what they do with him and what position they put him at the next level. Jim's saying Dungey's play reminds me of Tebow. He's the right-handed Tebow, right? Richard's saying our freshmen were great this season. That's a terrific point, Richard, because you look at just a few names to mention, Jarvian Howard running the football, Taj Harris, and the young receivers. Nykeem Johnson, not a freshman, but a young guy out there performing. Andre Schmidt comes out of nowhere, and he could be the best kicker in the country this year. There were players on the defensive side of the ball that got an opportunity. Trill Williams being one of them. Somebody just mentioned Trill here. Connor mentioning Trill, Andre, etc. Came right in. And I think that's still a selling point that Dino Babers has. He can go into a recruit's living room and say, I'm not going to promise you playing time, but here's what I can show you. The following players got on the field and impacted this football team. So young guys are getting in there. And I mentioned the transfers that are there. The most obvious young player that we're all looking forward to seeing is Tommy DeVito, who I thought we'd see today. And I'll tell you what, Boston College got a lot of pressure on Dungey today. This was a game where you needed Eric Dungey, because he made a lot of plays with his feet, not only to run the football, but he extended plays. And that's what he's good at. One flaw that the Syracuse offense has, they cannot pass protect. The pass protection on the offensive line has been pretty poor, frankly. So that's what Dungey does for you. And I'd be curious to see how that is fixed and tightened up going into next year. Tommy DeVito taking over, because he's mobile, but he's nowhere near what Eric Dungey is in that department. Much more of a traditional in-the-pocket quarterback. And one of the benefits of a bowl game is you've got 15 practices to figure that out. It's not only preparing for your opponent in the bowl game, you've got an eye towards next year. That's gold for a coach. Those 15 extra practices are absolute gold for Syracuse, and that's something they have not had for the past 5 years. That's how programs get and stay ahead. That extra practice time is absolute gold for Syracuse. So they'll have to figure that out with Tommy DeVito. Andre Sisco, another young player, as David notes here, who was huge on the field this year. Guy had 7 interceptions, which tied for the national lead going into this Sunday. We'll see how the rest of the day plays out here, as we're talking live at about 4:30 in the afternoon on Saturday. But there's another young guy who steps in and makes an immediate impact on the field. Joe mentioned Hendricks, who, he got hurt earlier this year and was well on his way to being another player making an impact right away. So the future is bright, but certainly the current state of affairs is bright for Syracuse football as they get a 42-21 win over Boston College. So now we wait for whatever bowl game the Orange will be going to. And again, that is next Sunday. They're going to make that announcement. So we'll find out if it's the Camping World Bowl, the Sun Bowl, the Gator Bowl, Pinstripe Bowl. We'll see. In the meantime, hope you guys had a terrific Thanksgiving holiday and you're enjoying your weekend. Just a reminder that my recap will be up on Sunday morning. Make sure you read all the great coverage from Nate Mink and Stephen Bailey and the crew that were in Chestnut Hill covering this football game. We'll be doing this for some basketball games as well, including after Syracuse plays Ohio State on Wednesday. So hop to the Syracuse football basketball Facebook page via syracuse.com, Syracuse Orange Basketball on syracuse.com. Like that page, which I'm sure many of you have already done, for all the great coverage there. And when we hop on live here after the games, you'll see it pop up and you can be ready to participate. So come on by after some basketball games coming up. We're doing a select few during non-conference play, but we'll be there for every ACC game. And, of course, we'll be right back here talking football with you on Facebook Live after the bowl game, whenever and whoever they play. In the meantime, thanks for hanging out with us today. It's all been presented by our friends at Krause Health. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you next time here on Facebook Live.